audience members, thank you for coming to the 2020 series presented by the New York Film Academy. The 2020 series are conversations with amazing creative visionaries about craft, creativity, and collaboration. You know, the three legs of the pillar of being a great artist. I am Liz Hinlein. I am a creative director and filmmaker, and I have the amazing interest and excitement and to present to you today's guest, Ron Simons, who is a brilliant, prolific producer, both in film and theater. Thank you so much, Ron, for coming to us today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So Ron has super amount of knowledge. We're going to try to get as much out of him as we can in our conversations. We also are going to be having so it's 20 minutes of conversation between Ron and I, and it's 20 minutes of answering any type of questions you guys have, global audience questions. We'll try to get to as many as possible, but this is more like jazz. We're going to freeform and just feel out what feels fun to talk about. So Ron, because you're such a enigmatic producer, when you think about being a producer and someone asks you, maybe not in the business, what is a producer? What do they do? What do you say to them?
Usually I say that a producer is the CEO of the enterprise, right? Which is to say, and often is the founder, though not necessarily. My job as I see it is to find beautiful pieces of art and help them go from whatever stage they are in, something in someone's mind, something on something, some page, to becoming a film or a theater piece or whatnot. So why I say CEO is because this is the person, he or she is the first person on the ground, other than the other creatives, who have to set up the institution that will create this beautiful piece of work. How we have to hire everyone, the cast, the crew, the marketing department, the ad agency, the PR agency, every single detail that has to be focused on so that the thing can happen usually comes down to the point of the producer making sure that all those T's are crossed and I's are dotted. So in some ways, he's a CEO. In some ways, she's a president, because as a producer, you can bring on co-producing partners, and those producing partners and you will decide who takes the lead on the ground activities versus things like raising money. Each individual producer has his or her own strength. I know some who are really good at just raising a ton of money. I know others who couldn't tell you a good story if they saw it, but they can deliver a film on budget and on time. So depending on how one views oneself, I like to think of myself as a creative producer because I'm driven by story. Everything about what I do is driven by the story. Do I like spending time in spreadsheets? Not even a little bit, but I have to do it. And I have an MBA in marketing, so I know how to look at a spreadsheet. I would rather not ever have to look at another spreadsheet again and just do the creative stuff. So that's what I would say. That's a long answer to a very short question, which is, I say normally a CEO.
I like it. I like it. And so we were talking before, there is a difference between producing for film and producing for theater.
Yes.
And when you're starting a project, how do you delve into those differently? Which hats do you have to put on that are different for each venue, basically?
Well, it's been my experience that when I'm dealing with a play, a good part of what a good producer has to do is develop the play. It could be a great play, but it can always be a better play. And since you only have one chance to make a first impression with potential investors, you want to make sure that that entity, that story is tight. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be tight so that people can see what it is that you're trying to do, the importance of the story, how compelling the story is, and how interesting the story is to them personally, right? So that, I can spend years doing that, literally years working. And if there's other creatives, like if there's music, there's the composer, if there's lyrics, there's a lyricist, if there's dance, they're the dancers and the choreographer. but I spend a lot of time in the development phase of a play because it means that you've got to bring partnerships in. So not only the creative partners, but you want to try this thing out. So you've got to find a theater, regional theater, or an off-Broadway theater to mount the show at the appropriate time so that you can see, you know, how is the pacing of the show? You know, are there characters who are getting lost? You know, is there a story arc? And how steep is that story arc? Does it resolve? And that's where you have to have that call and response of an audience, which is very different for a film, right? A film, you have to imagine how this is going to land. In a theater, you will hear and see exactly how it lands. And it may not be the same every night, but you will get the trend and you will understand what this thing is as it is developing and on its way to, let's say, Broadway.
And so how did you learn how to develop? Like, that seems like a very specific part of being a producer that not everybody would be sophisticated at.
Well, I was lucky because of I'm an actor and have been an actor, and I've been an actor for years. So as an actor, my job is to go into story and understand the characters, understand what's on the page, what's not on the page, to understand the context of the story. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is a Civil War piece. Well, I need to understand the context of Civil War to really be able to play a character, African-American character in that period. So it has been really helpful to me as an actor because I don't know everything, but I do know good story when I read it, for sure.
And what are some things that when you say it's a good story, what is that? What do you respond? Is it an emotional response? Is it a logical, this will make a bunch of money? Like, where are you going with that?
Well, if I told you that, Elizabeth, I'd have to kill you. And you're such a nice lady. Well, you know what? People ask me that all the time. What's your secret sauce? And I'll tell you the things that I can articulate. It does have to have a story arc, right? The story begins here. There's a whole lot of stuff happens and it ends over here. And that journey of what the arc is of the story is key. You can't just have very interesting characters, you know, and see what their journeys are from the beginning perhaps to the end, or midway to the end, or wherever they begin and where they end. The story arc must be clear and it must be compelling. There has to be, of course, a protagonist. There needs to be an antagonist. There could be multiple protagonists. There could be multiple antagonists. You need to, I encourage you to read the play. I'm sorry, not the play, the book. He saved the cat. This play, you've read the book?
I know what you're talking about. It's a writer who talks about class, you know, Katie will know. Someone will know.
Yeah, okay. So here's what I loved about that book. That book really helped me understand the structure and what one must do. Because in filmmaking, as you know, certain things have to happen by act one, certain things need to happen by act two. Now, when I say have to, I mean the belief is, the standard thinking is, but if you're going to break it, which you can do, know what you're breaking it and why. Because it's the telling of your story where you don't need to have that structure that is so recommended for so many films that are being written and produced today. Do you know what I mean? So, but to go back to your question, the characters have to be interesting to me. They need to go on a journey, and I need to really care about them. And I don't have to care about everyone, but certainly the protagonists and the people around them. I love stories where I can care about the antagonist, right? That to me is really good storytelling. You know, those stories where the evildoer is absolute pure evil is so dull to me because there's no complexity. You know, I'm sure all of you who are here listening in understand what I'm talking about. And there are three things that all of my works needs to do. They have to be about underrepresented communities. They need to have high artistic integrity, which really is about what you do, who you bring on, and how you execute. And the third is high artistic integrity and commercial viability.
And that must be a hard trio to get together at the same time, because something can be very artistic and be this brilliant team, but and tell me what, because commercially sometimes we don't know what is commercial, because we only know afterwards, wow, that was Hamilton was really commercial. Who would have known maybe in the very beginning that that was, that original take was going to take off like wildfire?
Right.
How do you even know if something's commercially viable?
This is that ethereal thing. Like if you had told me, if I had read the screenplay, Beasts of the Southern Wild, I would have been like, this is a beautiful story. I love that little girl. Commercial? I don't really see it. But the thing is that there is no formula for how one looks at something that's commercial. The way I look at it is, will someone in the middle of Nebraska will want to watch this and be engaged by it? Maybe it's a 17-year-old girl, maybe it's a 30-year-old automotive worker, maybe it's whoever. And that is a matter of how connected I feel I am to my community and other communities around the country, right? So this is why you have to be a great producer, you have to be of the world. You need to know what trends look like. Do you know, it's like if you're a filmmaker now, you know that for a while and continue, horror films tend to be making a ton of money. Whether they're good or not is not as relevant as that first weekend box office, bada bing, bada boom. Let's move on to the next one, right? So there's this thing called the Zeitgeist, the Zeit Guide, I'm sorry. And it is this, I've become friends with them, and it's this publication that talks about what's happening, what's in the Zeit right now happening, and it's important, that's unusual, that's trending. And I try to read that as often as I can so that I can see the trend before it becomes the current, right? So I can see that something is happening and how that might impact the kinds of stories that I tell, the kinds of projects I bring on, because I feel like, okay, if this is where we're going, then there's a market for that, right? So the market is, for me, I've always said that producing, one of the fine things about producing is making the film for the right amount of money. If you're gonna make the film for $50,000 and you only make $150,000, that's okay, because you only invested $50,000. So it's gonna be good from a financial point of view. And it's always about the right price for the right content, because every producer worth their weight in gold really wants to get their investors their money back.
And it's that pretty much, what we talk about with like filmmakers, or when I teach, it's like, it's all about the audience, and it's all about, you're making a film for the audience. You're not making it to put in your closet. So you're thinking about what are their emotional reactions to this beat or this thing. So for you, beside the story, is one of your paramount things that your investors get their money back? Is that your bottom line?
Yes, and I wasn't, unfortunately, always focused as heavily on that. I was about the art, because I'm an artist. It needs to be beautiful. It needs to be, and my stuff tends to be critically acclaimed. Pat myself on the back, but that it hasn't always made money, right? So now I'm like, well, to have longevity in this business, you do need to have commercial properties to refill the coffers if you decide that you want to do this beautiful piece of art and a story that's never been told, that must be told in your mind. So,
do you feel there's stories that have never been told?
Oh my God, are you kidding me? Here's what I say. Most stories have never been told. That is a very, very different thing than saying, have all the universal themes been explored? I think all the universal themes have been explored. Now, which is not to say that I know them all, or there's one that I may not be aware of, but my job almost every single time is to take a lens and put it over a universal theme, a coming of age story, a story of revenge, or whatever that thing is, except that I'm going to have the context is going to be Japanese cowboys in Utah. We've never seen Japanese cowboys in Utah. We've seen stories of coming of age or what have you, but we haven't seen that story. So there are so many stories that are left to be told. There's a thing that says, there's the things that you know, which is very small. The things that you don't know, which is bigger. And then the things that you don't know that you don't know. And that's where I think all that stuff lives. The things that we don't know that we don't know.
So would you say a quality in a producer is humility and vulnerability and things that we wouldn't think about? Because to say you don't know what you don't know, one has to be humble.
Well, I guess that's true. I really am just honest because, first of all, I've never been good at keeping track of lies, number one. Number two, you don't know. There is so much that you do not know. Why would you go out there and say, well, I know this? Well, for what? Toward what end? Who are you? What are you trying to prove to whom? This is it. Now, if you don't like the story, you don't have to get involved in it, but I just need to call it as I see it. And I want you, whoever I'm collaborating with, to call it as you see it. And if we get enough of diverse voices in the room, we can create something beautiful, because you know stuff that I don't know. I know stuff that you don't know. She knows things that none of us knows, right? So in that sense, humility is very key. And I think it's key, not just the producers. I think it's key to all the creatives who are involved in storytelling.
Mm-hmm. And yes, and we've talked with other people about listening and being able to be a listener, and that seems key as a producer. And what people have told me, it's like the funny thing is, if you tell me if I don't say anything and listen, you're going to tell me everything you know, and then I'll know what I know, and I'll know what you know.
That's right. That's right. Because if I'm talking, that means I'm not learning, because I'm not listening. Why am I not listening? Because I'm talking. So that's why because I'm a very talkative person. I love to discuss and debate all kinds of things and whatever. And then there are times where I'm like, you know what? Shut up. Because there's this incredibly, I find intelligence very sexy. So let me just acknowledge that. But when I find someone who's really, really smart and I get to spend some time with them, I'm just like a kid in a candy store. I'm like, so what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And what do you think is going to happen in the future? And so that's the height of excitement for me. I know, sounds crazy. I've always been a geek though, so there is that.
We had talked about that one of your things that you love to do is learning. And I would love to hear about your learning and how you've, obviously we talked that you started a little bit, you didn't start out of the womb being a producer, started maybe a few years later. And how did you speed up your learning? And was it your learning and your curiosity that really drove you to shift gears in your career?
Well, as I said, I was an actor, and what was happening that got me to thinking about producing was I was seeing things that were on the stage that I thought was just mediocre. I was being offered roles as an actor that were not particularly interesting. They were often stereotyped. I remember I was in a musical, where I played an old, fat, drunk man. And I thought, in the middle of the monologue, it came across my mind, is this the story you want to tell? And then it was gone because, I'm in the middle of the monologue. But that thought never left my head. And so then I'm like, I've been to readings where some amazing stories are being told, and they are caught in workshop hell. Like they've been a reading and another reading and then a workshop. I said, you know what? These stories need to be told. So I said, not knowing anything about what a producer is I'm going to start producing. And I literally said that. And then people start sending me scripts. I thought I was going to do a play. Turns out the first thing I did was a film. And which is what I said earlier, what drives me once I made that shift is the curiosity. I'm always interested. Like I'm that guy who's on set talking to the cameraman going, so this is a red, what version of a red is this? And how does this differ between the previous one? And is this the best camera on the market, for the money? I'm that person because I really want to learn from everybody as much as I can. So I would say the short answer is curiosity drove me. What keeps me here, because that first experience was hell-raising and I was done. I said, that's it, nice experiment, finished. But then I got turned on once again by a really beautiful story that had not been told. And then I was right back in it.
And what was so challenging about your first experience? We love hearing the tales of in the trenches.
Okay, so I was the executive producer, and the film had been through the Sundance Film Festival like 10 or 11 years before. and has, you know, as some films have had, they had false starts and blah, blah, blah. Any rate, so I came on board, things were starting falling in place. We'd hired a producer who had done, you know, independent feature films before, and I was going to work alongside him, understand how, you know, learning through, you know, being a paid mentee. So it was going along lovely. And then one day something happened and the director accused the producer of being racist, that this producer was a cancer to the project, that this producer was not allowed to be on set, won't take any phone calls, no emails, no text messages, nothing, persona non grata. Let's just say having that be the dynamic between a director and a producer is not helpful at all. So we didn't have more money to go off and find another producer. So then I stepped in and started serving as a producer, and the producer who was supposed to be a producer was more my consultant, right? Mm-hmm. That was a thing that I had to deal with. I also had to deal with, as an executive producer, another producer on the show who literally called me on the phone and said to me, "You need to put more money in the show." I said, "I'm sorry, what?" "You need to be putting more money in this show. You know you have more money. Put more money in this show." I said, "First of all, you don't know what I have at all, period, in the story." Mm-hmm. I said, "So don't presume to know what I have, what I do, and even regardless of what I have, I get to decide what I get to do with that money." When I tell you that we were screaming on the phone, I mean, my inner Detroit came out, and I, like a way that it had not done, for decades. So, long story short, at the end of the conversation, he profusely apologized. It was very inappropriate. "I'm so sorry," but it didn't make for a good working relationship with him. So I'm not working with him. The director's not working with the producer. The producer can't talk to the director. So it was this very fragmented team that could not possibly work to its most efficient level because people just couldn't communicate. That was like, I grew so many gray hairs. Second thing is, in that same project, so we had this editor, and so we were looking at the first assembly in my basement. I was living in New Jersey, and now I've never seen an assembly before in my life, right? So I don't even know what that looks like or what it feels like, smells like, or tastes like. So I'm sitting there, and I remember thinking to myself, "Wow, we are so, yeah, we're totally, yeah, we're fucked, yeah." And over time, of course, I realized, well, you know, an assembly is an assembly. Mm-hmm. But in that process, the show was not, the film was not getting better. The story was not being found. And in fact, one of the saving graces is that one of our mentors at Sundance says, "You need a new editor." So we let that editor go. We brought in a new editor, and suddenly there was a film. There was this beautiful film that had beautiful footage and subtlety and color. And I was like, wow. That's when I realized that the editor is as no less a creative than the director, the writer, mm-hmm. the actor, because as my friend once said to me, faculty member at Columbia University, he said, "There's the film that you write, the film that you shoot, and the film that you edit. And they are not necessarily all the same thing. You sometimes find the best story."
So,
I think I answered a long answer to your short.
No, that was a great answer. I love that story. So as you progress further, did you look at, after that experience, were you like, okay, I need more mentors, and is this the experience every film is going to be? Like, how did you even know how to pivot from that?
Well, what I said from that was, well, first of all, I said I was done and I'm not doing it anymore. So there was no need to be worrying about anything. But once I found the next project, what I said is that there needs to be a high level of collaboration, not just with other producers, but with everyone, because the lack of collaboration was so great that I shudder to think what that film could have been had we been all operating together. Did I find a mentor? No. Did I find good collaborators? Yes. And good collaborators, when I find them, I hold on to them for dear life. And I try to work with them as often as I can, on as much as I can, whenever I can. And I do feel like I wish I had had a mentor. I wish I still had. I wish today even I had a mentor, because there's so much that I still am learning about, filmmaking and, creating theater. Because it's challenging for me, because a lot of theater producers don't do film. They just do Broadway shows. So they go deep, 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 deep Broadway. We read the Broadway briefing every morning. We go to see every play. We're constantly going to readings of new works. We're constantly reading plays. But guess what? Filmmakers are also reading, Filmmaker magazine, and they're going to every film festival, and they're looking at new, so to be extraordinary in both, I don't know if I can be. So my challenge is always trying to get as much as I can from each of these so that I can do my job to the best of my ability.
You're squeezing out as much as possible. Understandable. And it's fascinating, because I think, how do you see that both affect you? Because obviously telling the story of a theater piece is much different than telling a story of a film. And what do you, we always tell stories to really learn about ourselves through the storytelling. What do you learn by, from both sides, I guess, is the question.
Well, on the one level, I want to say a good story is a good story is a good story. Part of what a good producer who has tentacles in a variety of mediums is to understand what should come first, the play or the musical or the film, or maybe the TV show, understanding where the piece is now and what it lends itself most to, which is a very nebulous thing. I cannot describe how I come up with, I feel like you know what it is? It's intuition. Mm-hmm. So I say that to say that is the creative's most powerful tool, is intuition and listening to it. But to your point, what do I learn? I learn from my story so much more about who I am and why I am, and I think that that's what the hallmark of a good story is. Like, I remember my second film, Gun Hill Road, was about a Puerto Rican dad who came home from prison to a Dominican wife who was having an affair and a teenage son who was transgendering. When I tell you that I knew nothing about, this is back in 2010, no one knew the word transgender in this country. There are a lot of gay people who never heard transgender. But I will tell you, I was worried, and it became, of course, as things happen, especially at film festival. Oh, it's that trans play, trans movie. Oh, it's that Black Panther movie. So they try to bring it down to, even though it represents not the core of the story. But one of the things that I really loved about that story was when dads who appeared to be Latino would come to me in tears and talk about how beautiful and moving that story was. Because I thought, given the machismo in African-American families and Latino families, that the men would just get up in the middle of the film and walk out. But at the end of the day, it wasn't about transgender. It was about the love of a father and his son. And if you are a father or a son and you have love, well, guess what? There's an entree there. There's a door for you to come in if you want to. So I just say that to say that if your story only speaks to a small particular group, then you are not writing specifically enough.
Mm-hmm. Or, I mean, it's going deep and wide at the same time. You're thinking very deeply, but then you have the bigger universal theme.
Which you need to understand are in the show. Like, that's one of the things, when people pitch me projects, I want to know, yes, what's the genre? Yes, what's the time period? Yes, what's the budget? But I want to know, what are the universal themes that are explored here? And if you don't know what the universal themes that are explored there, then you're not doing everything you can for that film, because there are things or places where this film needs to be seen, or you need to be engaged with some people because, it's a story of coming of age, and that opens up all kinds of doors that other universal themes won't open, right? So the advice I would say to anyone who's doing a filmmaker, know what your universal themes are. And as a writer, if you can know that too and articulate it, great. But the work of a writer is always shifting and changing. I mean, like, you know, a play is never done. It's just published.
That's funny. Very interesting. So we're going to go to some questions. So Nikita asks, what is it about producing that people are usually misinformed about or just underestimate?
Most people think that being a producer is glamorous and fabulous and star-studded. You hang out with all these celebrities and you go to all these parties and you go to these award ceremonies and you win awards and then you go to more cocktail parties.
And you don't?
Sometimes you do. Most of the time.
Behind you, the awards and the
yes, okay, sometimes. But that's, you know, and I'm very proud of all 4 of those. But I've done a lot more plays than 4 plays in my career, right? So these are the 4 that made it, you know. So, and I did. I get to go to award ceremonies. I got a statue, got to put on some nice clothes, all that stuff. But before any of that could ever happen is years of hard work. You and I talked about this, you know, the other day. You should vet your collaborators, you know, like you're going to marry them, because you're going to be in bed with them for years. So it's important that you have a great working relationship with them, and knowing that being a producer, honestly, practically no one cares. Certain people care about the director. They certainly care about the actor. You know, every once in a blue moon, if the producer is like big and have big blockbuster, you know, titles up behind themselves, they might go, oh, okay. But in general, if you're looking for appreciation and a job well done and all that from the population at large, don't come into producing.
How would one learn to produce? Like, what do you think, like, what do you wish someone had told you, okay, this is what you need to learn or even think about producing?
Ooh, that's so much. If I had to do it all over again, I would probably seek to be a mentee to a mentor, a producer, you know, so that I can be in the rooms, because that's kind of how I learned to produce for Broadway. I was in a room where all these things were talked about from everyone, from ad to marketing to press to whatever. So I got to learn first the vocabulary, and then second, what these terms were and how are they used to make for a better production. So I would get a mentor where I, you know, have to do it all over again. In absence of a mentor, I would probably either go to school and study producing. I know of a few producing curriculums, but know this, you're gonna run into something with every single film that there's nothing written in any book about, that you're gonna go, oh, this is that thing that I now need to do this. No, you need to have creativity, and you need to know that the buck stops with you, and that there are gonna be problems that no one ever whispered in your ear about, and nothing on a piece of paper ever told you gonna happen. And then it happens. Now, what do you do? So those are the 2 things. Get the knowledge through a class or a book. There's this book, Producing for Dummies, I think it's called. And it's very simple. It's very easy. It gives you a sense of the vocabulary, if nothing else. Is it going to make you a proficient producer after reading it? No. What's going to make that happen is you're doing film after film after film.
And New York Film Academy does have an amazing producing program.
There you go. Bada bing, bada boom. Done.
Go there.
There you go.
We have Andres asks, how would you define the word intuition for you?
For me, intuition is that little voice in the back of my head when I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to take project A or project B, and I've assessed both, and it looks as though B has greater commercial viability and can make a ton of money. So I should go with B. But then that little voice in my head says, actually, I think you should go with A. And I'll go, but why? And so my brain tries to map onto option A and fails, because it's not about the numbers or the quotients or the statistics or the data. It's about something tells me that at the end of that rainbow, there lies something that I need in my personal growth as a human being, my artistic growth as a producer and or actor. So I'm going to go there. That's what that is. Trusting that intuition is very hard, because if you like me are like me and you move through the world by using your brains to get ahead, that's all you've leaned on. To lean on something that is so ethereal as to say, something told me I should go over there, is very uncomfortable for a long time. Maybe very uncomfortable, but I have to say, knock on wood, so far, I have not once been led astray by my intuition. It doesn't always come out the way I thought, but there was always a payoff that would have not happened had I followed my first mind and gone over there.
Who do you talk to, like when you're in that decision-making process? Do you have like a posse you talk to? Do you have a, you know, who do you bounce ideas off of?
Oh, I bounce ideas off of a number of different people. You know, like there are probably 5 or 6 people who I feel are really tied into their communities, right? And so if I'm trying to understand how a story may or may not land, you know, then I will go to them. If it has to do with producing, I almost always go to one of a couple of 3 producers, you know, and throw my ideas off of them. I go to different people for different reasons. I go to some people because I hate numbers. So I want them to look at the numbers and kind of go, okay, does this look like it makes sense? And do I have this right? Do you know what I mean? So yes, I have a varied, fairly large posse of people who I check in with.
And tell us why that's important, to not just keep it to yourself and to sort of bounce things off.
Well, on one hand, it's insecurity. And on another hand, I know that I don't know everything. There are people who have different life experiences than me that will have a different point of view, which is why I'm always trying to encourage diversity in any room. I tell people, if you go into a room and you say only one race of people, Houston, you have a problem, because there are points of views, there are experiences that you are not allowing to come into the room and inform whatever the work is that you're doing, right? So part of it is insecurity, but part of it is that I just simply know that I don't know everything, and that I am just curious. I just want to know, what do people think? Tell me what your thoughts are. I may not necessarily follow what your recommendation is, but at least I'll understand what your process is, why you think what you think, because I will go deep. You just told me the answer is 3 is never going to do. I'm like, no, you need to back up. So what made you decide that you even wanted to multiply these numbers to get to 3?
Falake asks, what's next for you? How have recent events affected what stories or roles you'll choose next?
That's a very funny and interesting question to have asked, because I had a production called Jitney, which was on tour when everything got shut down, and it was in Seattle. And I was talking to people about what a low risk property it was, because it would already won the Tony, and it's like amazing directing, all the other good stuff. I said, now, if you want a little bit more, if you're willing to undertake a little more risk, there's this project called Thoughts of a Colored Man, which we had done at Baltimore and Syracuse Center Stage, and to rave reviews, great, blah, 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 blah. But I thought I wasn't certain that it was going to have broad appeal. And then George Floyd happened. And then people woke up and said, what? Black men have been killed? They're being killed? What? This must stop. There could not be a more perfect time to do this play, because it's about 7 African-American men in New York over a 24-hour period, and never has a play explored the fears, the loves, the trials, the tribulations, the dreams, the hopes of African-American men. And that's very important if we're going to allow and want change to happen, right? People are often ignorant, people are often driven by hate because they're ignorant and they don't know. They haven't met. They haven't had a sit-down conversation. They don't even, it seems so odd to me that now, more than any other play that I'm doing, with a possible exception of For Colored Girls, that this play could not be more timely, could not be more pertinent, could not be more needed than right now.
Oh, it sounds so beautiful and so necessary, and the gods must be with you right now.
I mean, I tell people though, I said, you know what? I said, through all the tragedy that we've had to deal with this pandemic, I said, there must be some life that comes out of this. There's been death, but there must be some life, but some goodness must come out of this process of what we're going through. You know what I mean?
Well, and you are the man that is finding it.
Well, bless your heart. I think you're finding it as well. You need to tell them about your production, which is also very exciting, which I don't know if you have yet to do, but whatever.
Thank you. So Ron, we're at the end of our amazing time together. We just started talking. We have I have like 800 Post-it notes to ask you about, but unfortunately we're done. You're amazing and brilliant. Where can people find you, not harass you, but find you, talk to you, offer you some money for your projects?
Well, listen, you can send an email to my assistant, which is assistant@SimonSaysEntertainment.com. Especially if you're interested in investing in any of the projects, the one that's moving the fastest seems to be Thoughts of a Colored Man and For Colored Girls, which is also amazing. 2 different plays, one all about women of color, all about men of color. It all could be on the Broadway at the same time, just mind-boggling. Anyway, we're on Facebook. We have a webpage, www.SimonSaysEntertainment.com. So if you want consulting that's one-on-one about whatever your project is that you're working on, you can go to the website and you can sign up for consulting if that's what you're into. But otherwise, send me stuff about what your projects are doing, where I can see it. I love finding new talent, because though I'm completely over my head in terms of my own projects right now, I do like connecting with people who are creating good stories.
Oh, that's amazing. So thank you so much. And thank you, New York Film Academy, for giving us this platform to have such amazing, brilliant people here now today, especially in this time. We've had such great feedback from global audiences that this has been a big hit with everyone. They get to learn and really delve into the craft of filmmaking.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really feel honored. I'm a big fan of New York Film Academy.
Wonderful. Okay, thanks everyone. Be safe. See you next week.